What is going on, everybody? It's the Reformation Keegan, and I'm here today to review something. I'm here to review a comic. As many of you know, I'm a huge comic fan, and I'm not just a professional wrestler. I am also a student. I'm a university student. I currently hold an honors degree as a double major for history in English language and creative writing, and I am in the midst of obtaining a master's degree in English literature right now as we speak. I have about a year left. So I want to use it for something, and I want to add my interpretations of what I have learned as an honors and master's student into comics because I absolutely love comic books, and I want to view them rhetorically, and I want to view them through the English literary canon and the definitions that I have learned from my past readings in prose. So again, we're looking at Superman Smashes the Klan, and this is a comic that I think could have even been written in prose just based on its story and its premise alone. And what I found throughout these three issues is that there's a great social justice element to it that is used to a T in English literature when the authors can get their prose down. And what I mean by that is when they have the correct diction to analyze a story and give you a sense of pathos for an emotional effect, because the goal is to emotionally affect your reader in a lot of English literature. So with English literature compared to other forms of literature, we're trying to get a reaction out of the audience to sympathize with a character or to disregard the villain, but also understand why the villain does what they do. So in Superman Smashes the Klan, we get that. And instead of doing basically a plot summary on the book, I would like to look at the perspective of realism in this book. So as we know, throughout U.S. history, there has been a huge influx of racism and a huge influx of immigration. And the immigration is ultimately the subject of what racism becomes. So really, in this book, the Lee family is the unwanted subject when looking at this from a perspective of social justice and a perspective of realism. What this book does perfectly, in my opinion, is encapsulate the preconceived notions that the dominant group of people in America have at this particular time, and even today, unfortunately, of what are deemed as minorities. So this book does a great job at presenting that throughout the Lee family, and also through Matt Riggs, aka the Grand Scorpion, and through Chuck Riggs. And it really shows, again, through a perspective of realism, how the impressionability of a child is very, very susceptible. And it's almost like a rhetorical disease when a child like Chuck sees what his uncle does, but then eventually, through his own product of experience, needs to be educated not by somebody, but through his own experiences to move forward and understand the moral ethics of race and moral ethics of being able to be accepting of something else, and there's not one correct way of conducting, for lack of a better term, any business. So Matt Riggs, who's the Grand Scorpion, believes that in this book. He believes that he's conducting business for the right reasons, and the Fiery Cross Clan is obviously villainized to an extent throughout the perspective of hero and villain and good and evil, which is melodrama. But the thing is, the way the book is written, and this is where diction is very important, it's not the Grand Scorpion per se admitting that he's a villain, because he believes deep down that he's doing the right thing by ridding the race of the Chinese / Asians, because he wants an all one race, one religion country, which for North America, one, is not sustainable, and two, it's morally incorrect. So the concept of white supremacy we see throughout this is a moral indicator that Superman is going to be that symbol of hope. And that's very important here, because that's what Superman is in general. The canon of the character is that he is a symbol of hope that everybody needs, no matter what your race is, no matter what your creed/religion is. Superman is that symbol of hope that goes against the preconceived notions of domination and supremacy. So I don't necessarily want to always focus on Superman here because I think there is a grander narrative, but the story of Superman sticks towards his own canon. So you have Lara and Jor-El being introduced to him through being green aliens, and also too, before I forget, the symbolism of alien in this is very intriguing because Superman is technically an alien from Krypton, but also the foreign subject in North America is always described as an alien. So again, that diction, that word choice, extremely important in this. But Superman ends up meeting Lara and Jor-El, and the canon stays very similar, if not already the same, to how Superman ends up in Smallville, Kansas, where Krypton is about to explode, and Jor-El and Lara, they create their own rocket, and they send their baby boy to Smallville, unintentionally in Smallville, but they send him to Earth, so the Kryptonian race of people can continue. And Superman is he's almost human in presentation, but he's still alien because of the abilities. And again, this is kind of going against the logic of realism, but it's realism to the Superman canon, and the reactions of the Lee family to Superman would be realistic in this conventional and hypothetical situation if any of this were to actually happen on Earth. So we have Roberta all telling Superman near the conclusion of this that he's limiting his own self trying to fit in, which is, again, a message of social justice where a lot of people who have this one-dimensional way of thinking rhetorically, they don't necessarily show everything that they want to believe, and they also limit their own capacity to cognitively decide on what they need to do going forward when making decision making. So Superman, for example, can fly in this narrative, but he limits himself to doing it. And actually, when the character was created, he initially did not fly, and then did not fly very much, as he would leap buildings in a single bound. So this is a nice continuation of even that canon too. So this book says a lot, and it's the perfect example of less is more in a story. So when you're combining realism and social justice, you're going to get that pathos in your grander narrative and that emotional reaction out of the reader, because you stick to the original canon of Superman, which is already emotional in general, and then you add the Lee family, who's going to add another sense of relatability. And the other thing is this book is marketed for children, but there are a lot of connotations in this book that maybe a child would not understand right away, but maybe on a second or third read, they can become very educated on, because equality is very, very important. And the author, who's Gene Lung Yang, I hope I said that correctly, he uses Chuck Riggs as the subject of education for children, who is apparently the target audience for this book. And I can see it because Chuck starts out very ignorant and almost idolizing his uncle until he meets Superman, who kind of introduces him to these immoral acts that the Grand Scorpion does. And in turn, Chuck kind of has an epiphany, as we would call it in literature, and realizes that he was mistreating the Lee family off of preconceived notions that he was already uneducated on, which is a really good message for children when they're younger, so they don't develop these unfortunate habits going into adulthood. So basically, the kryptonite, which is Superman's weakness, is race in this point. So if we're going for the perspective of symbolism, this green crystal known as kryptonite is really the rhetorically preconceived notions of white supremacy that are going against every other race, and especially the Asian race in this book. So there's a lot of symbolism, a lot of little intricacies and constituents in this narrative that we can use even today. And I would argue this book was predicated off of 1946, a year after World War I, when there was still a lot of, again, racial and socioeconomic imbalance going on, and America was still reeling, as was every other country involved in World War II. So nobody really came out unscathed. But the immigration aspect of this book, which again predicates off of World War II, is a big factor in how children are going to interpret information going forward, because if they are raised in a way where they have this supremacist mentality, they are going to bring that again into adulthood. And the term again is a recurring theme in this, because you can see it in your daily lives. I can see it in my daily life with other people, where a lot of these habits are picked up very early and they're never addressed, which is why the Grand Scorpion takes things way too far when even they go to his house and they have the white hoods on, and they go to Dr. Lee's home. I was saying that more specifically. And they start burning a cross and start lighting things on fire, because in their minds, they believe that every other race is evil and that they are the superior race. Again, there's this good and evil dynamic too that's in melodrama. And this good and evil dynamic is really a paradox, because these people who are preaching that the other people are evil are really doing the evil act for the sake of self-justice. So that's a big issue that is targeted in this book. But I also wanted to mention the artwork, because I think in relation, the artwork is incredible and the artwork is very inclusive. So if anybody has ever played Mega Man or watched the animated series, or played Pokemon and watched Pokemon, or Sonic the Hedgehog, they can really relate to this anime style of art that you would see in those shows, in books, and in manga. So I think that the panels and the art are also a good rhetorical device for inclusivity going forward. But again, this narrative was absolutely fantastic, and I've read a lot of comics, and this is definitely one of my favorite Superman stories. It's definitely one of the most emotional, but I think in terms of social justice, it may be the best one out there. And I hope I could have brought a different viewpoint of this book to everybody, because usually a lot of reviews that are given are just plot summaries of what the book was talking about, but it doesn't really dig into it as a journalist, really examining why the author writes what they write, and why they choose certain words, why they choose certain phrases, and why they choose certain themes like realism. So let me know what you guys think. If you have read Superman Smashes the Klan, please let me know in the comments. You can follow me on X at KeeganRW, and I'm going to do more reviews of these going forward when I have some time and can do longer reviews. And if the demand is there, I will keep doing these, because I really enjoy doing it, and it's a way for me to show what I've learned in English literature and bring it into comic prose. So again, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back with more, and I'll see you soon.